Okay. Welcome, everyone, to the latest edition of the From Darkness to Light series. I'm here with Rebets and Esti. Firstly, thank you very much. I know you've got family responsibilities, not always easy. So thank you very
Yes,
much for joining us.
that is why I'm in my car. It's the quietest place. But in lockdown, I think for most adults, the quietest place has been actually their car. So there we go. But thank you so much for hosting me in whichever place we are in this pandemic. We're just grateful that we can communicate in whichever way it's possible, I think.
That's totally correct. I guess, firstly, to describe the particular challenge that you faced, and then we'll talk about some of the coping mechanisms.
Okay, so my husband and I, after we got married in London, we then moved to Israel. And my husband was in yeshiva doing smicha to become a rabbi. And we had our first baby about a year later. And this was a gorgeous baby boy. And he actually had his bris on time. We didn't know that he was very severely ill. And at about 10 days old, he started having seizures. So we rushed to hospital, and we actually ended up staying in hospital for about 2 years. So we rushed ourselves to hospital with him. And as they started doing all the investigations, they found out a myriad of health issues. He had underdeveloped lungs, holes in his heart. He was missing a kidney. His spine hadn't properly developed. There were so many things that were wrong with him that the doctors actually told us that they don't think he will survive to see his second birthday. In those first few years, he was on an oxygen tube, on a feeding tube. For lots of the time, he was unconscious. He had many cardiac arrests. Wow. During our stay in hospital, we were living in Shaarei Tzedek Hospital in the pediatric ward. That was our home. I would like to say home away from home, but I don't remember. I vaguely remember going back to our apartment in Harnoff to like shower and change and then go straight back. So we didn't, it was really our home. We got to know all the doctors there and the nurses there, and that was where we lived. And that was, we were very young. I was 21 at the time. Wow. And it was a huge challenge in so many areas. I mean, we were first of all very far away from our family. We were in Israel. And even though I knew Hebrew at the time, I knew like makolet Hebrew. So I knew how to ask for lechem or chalav, bread or milk. And I knew like taxi cab Hebrew, like, you know, how to ask them to get me somewhere. But I didn't know hospital Hebrew. By the time I left 2 years later, I knew all the words in Hebrew for every device, every machine. It was like a tutorial. It was my old pun in you know, how to ask for a blood test and for oxygen and for everything. So first of all, there was a language problem. So it was hard to communicate with the doctors. Our family was far away, even though all Jewish people are really family, and actually our friends and neighbors and people who we didn't even know really looked after us. But that's still different than having your own parents next to you. And also, we were very young. This was our second and third year of marriage we spent in the hospital together. Wow. So that's not a young couple's usual experience of their second and third year of marriage.
Just about to say.
Yeah, and so there were so many things. And then of course watching your own child suffer, and he was suffering a lot. They had to do a lot of different, not only tests on him, but operations, and there was a lot of suffering that you watch this very, very small baby go through. And you as a parent, you know, if you see your child have a nosebleed, or you're worried about them, or you see them fall and bang their head. But this was like 1,000 times worse, because, you know, they were just trying their hardest to help keep him alive, and while doing so he had to suffer a lot. So there were many different things that were going on that were incredibly challenging.
Wow. I can't even begin to imagine. You're 21, you're newly married, more or less.
Yes.
Anyway, by the way, a first pregnancy as well is
yeah.
I'm a man, I can't really say this, but a new experience, so to speak.
Totally.
You know, and it's a test and this and that. It must have been totally, oh goodness,
yes.
beyond a normal kind of expectation. I mean, how did you cope with that for the 2 years? You know, and then we'll talk about subsequently as well. But yes. What did he do?
So I think one of the biggest challenges in that time was really coping with our mindset. You know, you imagine that your life has a certain trajectory, and, you know, I had my life mapped out for me like everybody else does. Okay, we'll get married, we'll go to Israel, my husband will qualify to be this rabbi, then we'll go to another country and we'll do whatever it is, and we'll have children, and of course they'll be healthy and happy. I mean, you have a whole picture in your head, and then, like, totally out of left field, I mean, whenever somebody has a huge challenge, it's usually completely a surprise. You wake up one morning and your whole life is totally different. I think the biggest challenge for me was my mindset. But I thought, but this can't be happening to me. This is not my life. I already planned my life. This is not part of the plan. Like, and the acceptance of something so huge in your life. You have to go through. There was months and months of me waking up saying, when I wake up tomorrow morning, my life will be normal again. You kind of wait for everything to go back to the way it was. Like, everything has traveled a certain path in my life up till now. And then what was hard, I saw other young couples who also had their first babies, all our friends, and their life was like carrying on as normal. They took their babies home from the hospital, and then they would go to the park with their babies. They would discuss like normal stages of development. My son wasn't, our son wasn't developing at all. He was barely alive. So I was very lucky. I think we were very lucky that we were in Israel, because even though we were far away from family, we were very, very close to our rabbis and mentors, our teachers. And they gave us a lot of time because we were in a huge challenge. I remember speaking to Rebbetzin Heller almost weekly, and Rabbi Kellerman and Rabbi Berkovitz. I mean, if I would give you a list of 5 or 6 very famous, well-known people who were our rabbis and teachers and mentors at the time, who we would call all the time, and they would make the time for us. And I feel like, even though we had a lot of physical support, people used to bring us food to the hospital, which was great. And amazing people used to come to the hospital to sit with the baby so that we could go home and have a shower, whatever it was. So we had a lot of physical support, which is amazing in every Jewish community around the world. I think that the first thing people say when they're in crisis is, wow, the community just totally held us. And the community really did. But I would say, in terms of our mindset, spiritually, psychologically, mentally, I had a lot of questions about God and about life journeys, and about, big questions like, why would God bring a child into the world who needs to suffer? What's the meaning of this? How can I take meaning from this? Why do bad things happen to good people became a very real question in my life at the age of 21. and not just because I saw myself as like a person who was trying to be a good person, but that my son also was like just a person. Why would bad things happen to also? So there was a lot of huge questions that I needed speaking out with. And I feel that we were so lucky that we had so many people who were willing to make time for us. And these were people who are masters, like spiritual gurus, if you like. And they really had answers for me. And I feel sometimes when people are stuck in crisis, they weren't as lucky as us. They don't have spiritual gurus to reach out to say, please help us understand this so that we can make peace with this, so that we can accept this, so that we can not only accept this, but help this be a part of our growth rather than a part of our, downfall, or a part of our depression, and I feel that was that was huge for us, definitely.
Amazing. I guess it's also one thing knowing answers and being given approaches intellectually. It must be another thing then, kind of like making peace with that, and then, as you said, allowing it to be part of your growth. Intellect and emotion don't always match up in that way, right?
Oh, exactly. So part of the spiritual growth was that a lot of them said, you're a human being, you're going through this, you should experience all those human emotions. It's okay to be sad, to be angry, to be depressed. This is like, none of them ever said, well, you're just supposed to accept this. This is just like, and it was very good to hear, because often when you're trying to live a spiritually high life, you think that you're supposed to be godlike, meaning that you're supposed to accept everything that happens to you from God, and you kind of can't experience it in a real way, because why am I sad about it if I know that this was destined to be, and this is the best thing that happened to me? Why should I be? And all of them said, no, this is a process. And it was so good to understand that every spiritual growth is a process. It never just happens. It is a process of understanding, and then thinking about it, and then feeling it a bit more, and then you drop again. It's a process that looks a little bit like up and down. There's not like a straight line, or it's not like, growth isn't like a straight trajectory all the way up, but there's a lot of ups and downs and that's the way it's supposed to look. And when you give yourself that space, you can say, okay, today I'm feeling down, but tomorrow I feel inspired that this is just, we're in God's hands completely, and therefore you could feel the ups because you were also allowed to feel the downs, I think. Yeah.
Amazing. Wow, that's very, very inspiring. That must have been, if you take the story a little bit forward, what did that do in terms of, I guess, marriage? Not that, again, we would wish challenges, that early, or truth, actually, any time in marriage. And also, I guess, family, because, you've had kids subsequently, thank God.
Yes.
And they're, they've now got a different relationship in terms of their older brother. What did this do in terms of your approach and that whole challenge for your family unit?
So one of the things that Rabbi Yitzhak Berkovitz, our teacher at the time, told us, our rabbi at the time told us, was that he didn't know why this child specifically had to come down into the world and go through this. But then he said to us, but all your children will be different because of this. You will see that your children will be special because of this. And at the time, I was like, are you joking? I'm never having another child ever again. I remember leaving his apartment with my husband. And I was like, why is he speaking about other children? Like, as you mentioned, Danielle is our first child. Like, just the idea of like this, and having a first child in this way is so traumatic that you think, is every child, just like has to destroy you, like literally in order to build you? Is this like every experience you have as a parent? Because this is not fun. I don't know if I'm doing this again. And I remember not appreciating at the time, but now Daniel, our older son, he's 17 years old, and he still can't walk, he still can't talk, he still can't feed himself, he still needs 24-hour care. And we have lots of other children younger than him. And I would say that, a lot of us talk about that we live in an entitled generation, that we all feel entitled, and not only our children, also us. Like, we feel everything is coming to us, everything, and therefore not grateful for everything that we have. And even the most simple thing, like being able to walk and talk and feed yourself. And I feel like my children have this like innate gratitude for everything that they have. It's like they were born on a totally different level to me because they have a brother in the house who can't do anything. So they're so grateful that they can ride their bike, they can play a game of football, they can go to school, they can talk to their friends. They feel so blessed in their life.
That's
they
amazing.
feel loved by Hashem for being given so much, when really they're given what all regular children are given, which is like a big, noisy, messy house. And lots of things that go right for them, but lots of things that go wrong, and the usual trials and tribulations of just being a child, and like, sibling rivalry and friends and whatever. But underneath it all, I feel like I will never have to teach them to be grateful for their life, that just having the life that they have, they're being so gifted, and they say thank you a lot for things that I think other children don't say thank you for. And I think that is an outcome of just living with somebody who isn't as blessed as you, and seeing, it's like a post-it note that's up in your house every single day that says, you have everything, you are so blessed. And another thing that I think, they all love their brother. And I have so many stories that I could tell you of when they taught me something. Like when Danielle was about 5 and my next son, Yudari, was about 2.5, I had a friend come over with another boy who was 2.5, who was friends with Yudari, and they came as a play date. And this boy, and Danielle at the time was lying on the floor, and he was vocalizing, making noises. He can't speak, but he makes these noises. And this other 2.5-year-old boy was, I think, a bit scared of him, even though he wasn't doing anything. He was just like sitting on the floor, but he was making these noises, and it was strange. So this 2.5-year-old boy goes up to Danielle and hits him on the head and says, I don't like him. Okay, so the mother's in the room and I'm in the room, and this mother's so embarrassed. She's got nothing to be embarrassed of. Your son is 2.5. He's just doing it. And I don't know what to do, because I'm like, what should I do now? And Ari, who's 2.5, he said, well, I love him. He's my brother. And he puts his arm around him. And then this other boy who's 2.5 goes, oh, and then took a closer look at my son. And I didn't have to say anything. My son taught this other boy that Danielle's just fine. He's okay. He's totally okay to be around, and there's nothing wrong with him. And I did not move from that couch. And it was such a enormous lesson to me that, like, children instinctively understand. Or there's another story I can tell you, when my second son used to come home from school. So Danielle would be having a nap in his bed, and his favorite thing would be he would run into Danielle's bedroom and dive on him, to give him a hug, like literally did a flying dive. And I would run to like save Daniel from his younger brother who was diving on him. And his face was like totally squished on the mattress. And he had this huge grin on his face, like, I know I'm being loved. Don't worry, I'm fine. And as they grew older, my children have grown up with it, which I think is a blessing, because they sometimes say to me, oh, I met a child in the park that he was just like Danielle. And they go up to special needs children or children who don't look the same as other people, and they befriend them on purpose. We were part of Camp Simcha for a while, and there was a girl in Camp Simcha who had like a trach and lots of other equipment. And I remember, and she was like 7 or 8, and I had my 7 or 8-year-old son, and he sat next to her, and she moved to her for like an hour as if she was a totally normal, regular child. And she is, except for all her physical, mentally she is. And it wasn't phasing, and it wasn't embarrassing, and they're not awkward. So it's like this gift that keeps giving. It's like a gift. I don't even have to, my children just know so much more than other children. They just realize so much more, and I don't have to teach it. They just live it. And when you live it, it becomes part of who you are in such a natural, beautiful way that you don't even realize how unique you are. Like, my children don't know that other children would never do what they do. They don't know that because this is who they are. And I think that will stand them in good stead for the rest of their life. This is just something that gives them, a leg up. Right.
Amazing. I can just see that we're coming towards the end, but again, thanks for the time. I guess in a nutshell, like a kind of a 30-second, message for anyone else who is or has gone or will go through struggles, a little bit of advice for those people watching whose life may not be plain sailing.
Find yourself a spiritual guru. It's not a joke. It's very, very important to have also the physical care of the community around you. That's also very important, because that's technical success. So you have food to eat and you have but a lot is going on in your mind. You live 70 or 80% of your life in your mind. It's what you think about what's happening. It's what you're narrating in your head all the time about what's going on around you. And you can either feel blessed or cursed depending on what you think about what is happening. So let's say if somebody loses their job, they can either see this as like a great opportunity to find, new strengths in themselves, or they can just feel so depressed and upset that they cannot lift themselves out of it. And it's all about the way you're speaking in your head. And at 21, for sure, I didn't have any of the wisdom that I needed to deal with what we were dealing with. And whenever I spoke to somebody who was this like spiritual master, who had thought about ideas and concepts their whole life, they were 30 years ahead of me. Whenever I spoke to them, they always had something wise and insightful to say about what I was thinking and therefore feeling, because every feeling is preceded by a thought. And therefore, if you want to stop feeling a certain way, you have to change the way you're thinking about it. But sometimes we just don't know how to think about it. Sorry.
Don't worry.
Sorry. Sometimes we just don't know how to think about a certain situation. And we need to be taught that. And that's not taught to you in high school, and it's not taught to you regularly. It's like a special kind of teaching. And I would recommend that you find somebody who can help you think about it in a way that will be something that can build you. That's what would be my recommendation.
Amazing. Thanks so much. We appreciate it. You can go back into the house now.
Yes, I'm going to go back into the house. It's freezing in the car. Okay.
Thank you. So appreciate it. Thank you.
All the best. Bye-bye.